So welcome everyone to the Tobacco Use Interventions Programs and Promising Practices. We will be going over these programs and these promising practices from 9 to 11 a.m. today, and we've got a lot of information to cover. So let's go ahead and get started. If you are new here, a little bit about the TUPE unit. We here at LACO, we service and support all 80 LEAs in Los Angeles County. Some of the ways that we do that is by building capacity, which is offering trainings like the one today. We also offer support at individual LEAs in terms of trainings, parent presentations, student presentations, but we also offer educational materials at no cost, and any type of technical support that LEAs may need. We meet them where they're at in terms of their interventions, prevention, and cessation around tobacco use and vaping on campus. Our team is a mighty 4-person team. We have Mark Hernandez as our program coordinator. I am your presenter today, Linnell Lujan. I am the senior program specialist. We also have our senior program activity specialist, Kira McNeely, that deals with parents, family, and community engagement. And then we also have Jasmine Martinez, our division secretary, who will be manning our chat today and dropping in some of the resources and links that I will be going over today. This presentation is being recorded, so if for some reason you need to step away or leave early, or you liked it so much you thought maybe a colleague would benefit from it, we are recording it. So once the webinar is completed, you will be getting all of the resources, links, PDFs, as well as this presentation's PDFs and recording in an email by the end of the week. Please feel free to drop any questions or comments into the chat. We will be manning them throughout the next 2 hours. And any support materials will be shared in the chat and again, after the webinar is over in a follow-up email. Today, we're going to be going over, again, vaping interventions on campus and how to use those as alternatives to suspension. We'll go over 3 different intervention programs: brief intervention, healthy futures, and YVAPE. And then we'll hear from some school districts that are using some of these programs and how they're using them at their schools. And then, as always, we will finish up with some resources that come out of our office that are available to you in terms of, again, trainings, educational materials that you may use at parent presentations or with your staff, and then any contact information if you want to meet with us in order to help with some of your intervention policies. So let's get started. Intervention, vaping to interventions, and how to use those as an alternative to suspension. Here at the TUPE unit, we are often called by schools, school districts, LEAs, usually when schools are at that intervention part. They have a vaping issue on campus. It's starting to increase. Students are constantly being caught, and that's usually when we are called in. And so we're usually at that second tier of trying to address vaping on campus, which is going to be a different approach, right? Prevention is really stopping the problem before it starts, trying to prevent students from trying or becoming addicted. But when we're talking about intervention, it's more reactive. We are responding to a problem that has already started. It's already starting to ramp up and intense. And so our approach is going to be different to that. When we are working with schools and school districts, a lot of the time what we see is a response that somehow includes suspension. Whether that means that the consequence is strictly suspension, it might be one of our programs in addition to suspension. And what we're really trying to do is move away from that punitive part, and really offer more support in terms of the programs and the policies that we are sharing. We know that data shows that suspension is very, very common, not just in LA, in California and the nation altogether. Suspension is usually the response to any type of substance use, which includes tobacco use and vaping. But the problem with that is it furthers inequities, it hinders student achievement. When we're suspending students, they are out of the classroom, they are out of instruction, they are missing school, they're missing assignments. And a lot of the time, we're sending students home to probably do the one thing that they were suspended for, right? Is to vape more. Because when they're sent home, they're not necessarily being monitored by a teacher, a principal, an SRO. And so it actually gives them much more of an opportunity to continue to vape rather than fixing that problem. And so, because of that, suspension is only temporarily relocating substance use, but it doesn't actually address the root causes. It doesn't actually provide the support that the student needs in order to change that behavior. And so, what do we do about alternatives to suspension? How do we address the root causes? And in order to understand that, we need to know the different types of root causes that adolescents experience when it comes to substance use. If you were able to make it to our webinar earlier in the season, we covered sort of like a 101 vaping on campus and how to address it, where we go into depth on this. If you were not able to, we do have our webinars recorded, which I will give you access to at the end. But this is just a brief overview of some of the root causes that adolescents experience when it comes to deciding to use substances. One is the individual. The student is individually making this decision because they are experiencing things like anxiety, depression, maybe isolation. What we're seeing a lot is that students are self-medicating. They are using vaping, whether it's cannabis or nicotine, in order to calm their nerves, make them feel better, make them feel less anxious. But what we do know through research is that while it is a temporary fix, it actually heightens some of those issues that they're trying to fix. Another root cause is social. This is outward influences. This can mean peer influences, maybe trying to fit in with a certain crowd, trying to look cool. It might be access. Friends have it, it's around, it's always accessible, and so a student chooses to use it. It might be their perception of friend use. So everybody's doing it, so why not me? Or the cool kids are doing it, so maybe I should try it. We also have family dynamics. This can mean anything of access, right? Family members at home might be using it. Family might have it in their drawer, in their purse, and students have access to it, whether the parent or the adult knows or not. And then we also have the environment. How much access and how much exposure is the adolescent experiencing? Do they see it on social media every day? How many smoke shops are they passing while they walk to and from school? How many people and characters are they seeing smoking, vaping in music videos, on movies, in video games? What environment is the student experiencing vaping, and how much access does that give them? And so when we're looking at these root causes, um, it's really pointing to all these other outside factors. Long gone are the days of the, rebel without a cause. The bad student is the one who is smoking because they're trying to look cool. That's no longer the case, right? Our students aren't doing this just to be the rebel. They're not doing it just to be cool. There's a lot of other factors that are playing here. And if we're offering support to our students, the hope is that once we address these root causes, we are hoping that they will abstain from substance use or quit or reduce. When we talk about vaping on campus, we have our tiered supports. We talked a little bit about prevention. So that piece where all students get this lesson or this education about what vaping does to them, both to their health, to their mental health. And then you have interventions, which are some students, right? Those who are probably already vaping, they're being caught. They might have already been suspended. And so today we're really going to cover that part, the second tier of intervention. And we'll be going over YVAPE, Healthy Futures, and Brief Intervention as those intervention programs. These are some of the recommended intervention programs that we recommend out of our offices. There are no-cost programs, and they're sorted into 3 different groups. You have the facilitated by school staff. So this is normally done by a counselor, a school nurse. It could even be an SRO or a teacher that has been assigned to this. But this is if you have the capacity, if you have the staff that is able to be trained and able to carry out these programs throughout the school year. Then you have the self-paced online programs. And these are the ones that you would assign to a student, and the student could follow through that program or that curriculum or that lesson on their own, and then come back and report that they had completed it. And then finally, the facilitated by outside partners, which is led by outside cessation counselors. So this would be in the instance that your school or school district does not have the capacity, does not have the staff to be trained and to follow through with these programs. And so you refer your student out to a program where their cessation counselors will support and help the student through the program, and then report back to the school of the student's completion. With that said, those are one of the things to consider when considering some of these programs. One of which is, how do they fit into your progressive discipline matrix? Does your school have Saturday school? Does your school have a program specifically addressing vaping? And one of these programs fit in there? How will this fit into what already exists? And if not, how will you use these programs? The other thing is, how can you track referrals, participation, and completion? What is the best way to do that in terms of these programs? Is it easy to assign students a self-paced individual lesson or curriculum program and have the student report back? Or is it best to have an actual staff on campus lead the student through the program and actually witness their completion? Lastly is, what current resources and staff capacity do you have at your school? Again, if there is no staff capacity, maybe a partner-led program would be helpful. And that would be referring a student to professionals who would carry out these programs for you and then report back to the admin or the counselor that the student had completed it. And so really taking those into consideration when it comes time to deciding what program works best for your school and your students and the capacity that you have. So with that said, let's look a little bit deeper into some of these intervention programs. First, we're going to hear from Brief Intervention, which is brought to you by EMT. They are the trainers. They offer a training course that will train your staff, your counselors, your SRO, whoever is that's going to be, um, on how to carry out these brief intervention interviews. These interviews are one-on-one, so this wouldn't be helpful to do like a classroom of students who may have gotten caught. This would be a one-on-one meeting with the student and the counselor or the staff member. There's usually about 2 to 3 sessions that could last anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes. This is best used in grades 6 through 12. There are free trainings that are offered by LACO. They're also offered by the county, the state. And so we can give you some information on upcoming trainings. However, EMT also does offer trainings at a cost to schools and school districts. So for instance, if you have a group of counselors that you want to train, you would be able to contact EMT and hire them to come out and train your staff. So what we are going to hear from Ira Saknoff, who is a peer resource and training consultant. He's going to talk a little bit about brief intervention, how it works, how the training, what the training consists of, and a little bit about the thought process behind brief intervention when it comes to addressing those root causes.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about brief intervention. And, you know, one of the things I think I want to share with you is just how I first got involved with brief intervention in the first place. It was around 20 years ago. I was coordinating a tobacco prevention program for the San Francisco schools, and they got a big alcohol prevention and intervention grant. And they, you know, they were looking for someone to help coordinate that program. And they said, hey, Ira, would you be willing to do that? And I said to them, I said, well, you know, only if you allowed me to find a program to bring in that we could do here in San Francisco. And they said, go forth and find. And this is the program I found over 20 years ago. And I've been training for it for a very long time. And you know, it's a program that I really, really believe in here. So let me share with you a little bit about brief intervention. Basically what we do is we want to provide a forum, and this is all done one-on-one, old school, one-on-one with people. And we train people to do this. And I think LA County has been having 2 or 3 trainings every single year in brief intervention. So we probably train a couple hundred people to do this. And what it is we want to provide a place for people to do some talking about the alcohol and drug use. We want to give them accurate information, but it's not an information-based program, okay? And what we're really trying to do with this program is support people in trying to find out, hey, is any of the things that you're doing, maybe tobacco, maybe alcohol or other drugs, is it impacting you in any negative ways? And that's really what we're doing here, is we're trying to find out in this conversation with them, is it impacting them in any negative ways? And then we want to empower young people to set some goals for themselves and make better informed choices. And a lot of what we do is to utilize motivational interviewing to empower rather than enforce. Okay. And again, and if they're needing further help, you know, we hope that you'll refer them to other services. So brief intervention is a short-term educational conversation counseling type of intervention that usually consists of 2 to 3 sessions with an adult and a young person. Again, and it's aimed at those adolescents who are using tobacco, marijuana, alcohol, or other drugs. And this approach uses motivational interviewing, CBT. As I always like to say, we do not do therapy, but we use a lot of their techniques and also acknowledge the stages of change also in there. So that's a little bit about it. But to talk about what it is BI is for those young people who have a relatively short history of use. And by the way, that short history could be years, but you're not usually working with young people who've been using substances for, 12 or 14 years. And who are starting to experience some trouble. So there's stuff going on that we know that is happening with young people, but they're not yet dependent or addicted. And a lot of times you won't find that out until you do brief intervention with them. And it's also absolutely okay for a young person to come completely ambivalent about what. So this is not the kind of program where we say to a young person, you must be ready to change, right? No, most of the times the kids come because they're forced to be there, and we're okay with that. So what is BI? BI is 2 usually hour sessions. There's something called the pre-session, which is around 15 minutes. And trying to get the kid to know what we're gonna do in those 2 other sessions. And session 1 is all about building the relationship. And session 2 is really building motivation to support change. And we do have this optional meeting, which is for parents and guardians, okay? And so it's not mandated, but it's optional. And we have very specific principles in our program when we meet with the young person. We want them to know that the program is about them and for them. And the purpose of this program is to see if maybe there may be some better ways, and to let them know we're not gonna, change you, and that you're the only person who can change, and we're not there to make them change. Okay. But we are there to talk to them about the possibility of changing and seeing if changing is something they want to do. Okay. And those really are our core principles about brief intervention. The other thing that we really like about BI is that it appeals to young people because we are not telling them what to do. Developmentally, teenagers, they do not like being told what to do. And with this program, that's exactly what's going to happen. We're not going to tell them what to do, which is why we think it's so effective. It's a self-guided change. And it's really based on these worksheets that we've developed. And the worksheets are asking some very tough questions of them, right? They're asking very, very tough questions. The other thing is that there are so many young people who could use this right now. And what we found is a good 20 to 25% of high school students at this very second could probably use brief intervention. It's also been shown to be incredibly effective. Okay, that's the other thing that's really important. And this picture kind of shows a little bit about who are the people that we're looking to work with. And who BI is really looking for are those people who are mild users and just starting to get into moderate use, and even the very beginning of substantial use. If they are already addicted, they're going to probably need some specialized treatment. But, BI can really work with a large number of young people who are at the beginning, middle, and even get into the very substantial changes. And so those are the people who can benefit from this. The other thing is that brief intervention is research-based. And this research has been done a few times. And they took students who were caught using substances at high schools, and they broke them up into 3 groups. One had no intervention, the other had brief intervention, the other had brief intervention with this additional parent meeting. And what we found out is that 3 months, 6 months, and a year later, what we found out is those students who went through BI had much higher quit rates and were using less substances. Those who had this one additional meeting with the parents even were using less and had higher quit rates. So it's a program that has quite a bit of history behind it and has been around for a while. Now, in order to do this, and again, people who do brief intervention get trained right now. It's in 2 1/2 days, and it's online at this very second. We train people, but because they need certain skills. Some of the skills in order for this to be effective are the following. You need to be someone who leads and is great at reflective listening. The person conducting needs to be someone who leads with support and empathy. And you need to be someone who's willing to compliment people, Even though a young person may feel like they're sent to you or forced to be there and that they're being punished, we do not view this as punishment. We're complementary in the work that we do with young people. The other thing is you have to have the ability to adjust to resistance in order to do this. I'll give you an example. Someone comes in to the meeting and they say something like this: "So stupid, I have to be here and meet with you. Really, I got caught with weed, like that's really a problem?" And as opposed to saying to them, "You know what, you were caught, you got me for 2 sessions, sit down." No. Instead, what I'm going to probably say to someone who's that resistance is something like this: "You know what? It sounds like you don't really think you need to be here. I got an idea. How about if we try to get through this quickly?" And so you have to have the ability to adjust to the resistance. The other thing, what we're trying to do in this program is you have to have the ability to create cognitive dissonance. And the worksheets are going to so help you do that with a young person. What I like to say is what we're trying to do in this program is we're trying to get a kid to go, huh, maybe it's not all good. And then if we get them to there, we then have something to work with. The other thing that's really important to know, that we accept a harm reduction strategy if that's what the student chooses to do. Okay, and that's really important. We spend a whole lot of time on this. And by the way, does anyone know what the best harm reduction strategy for a young person is? It's not to use anything at all. Sometimes people get confused when we say harm reduction strategy. What does that mean? Is that, the best thing a young person can do in a harm reduction strategy is the least harm that will happen to them is to not use it all. But if a student is unable or unwilling to do that, we will work with them on other goals that they choose to work with. And that's really an important piece of the brief intervention. A couple of other points here. The main objective of this brief intervention is to help the young people recognize the dangers of their drug use, ideally resulting in changing their substance using behaviors. And our purpose is to promote the consideration of behavior change. And it's our job when we do BI with a young person to help them get through the stages of change. And that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to find out what they're interested in doing, what they're willing to do, and work with them with coming up with plans to be able to make a change. A couple of other key points. With this work, when we do harm, it does not condone use, and instead it encourages the reduction or cessation of use. I'll give you just a quick example of that. We're working with young people who are caught on campus, and sometimes we'll get a young person to say, "You know what? I'm never going to bring this to school ever again. I don't plan on using it at school ever again." I would then say to them, "So it sounds like what your goal is on your way to school, and at school, your goal is not to use at all. Did I get that right?" Even though they didn't say on their way to school, I'm still going to try to get more with that. And so what we're trying, but what I will never do is ever say to them, ever, "So your goal is not to use at school, but this weekend, party." No high-fiving drug use ever. But that's the conversations we're trying to have with young people, is to see what they're willing to do in this work. We always like to say freedom of choice comes with consequences. Comes with freedom of consequences. Someone gets caught again, there's further consequences for them. It's the how we do this that is so important, which is why it's not a 1 hour or 2 hour training. Everyone who does brief intervention has to go through a 7-hour training where we teach you how to use the worksheets, which are so critically part of what we do here. And a couple of things just in our approach. Behavior change goals are always individualized. And while the worksheets are all the same, it's the same questions, what their goals are different for every single young person. The feedback that we give to a young person is based on where the individual is at with their alcohol and drug use. And Any behavior change that reduces harm is a positive result. It's never what I would want ever for the young person. I would like for all young people to not use and choose that. But if they don't, and they're willing to still make changes, we're on the right road, okay? And in order to do this work, you have to be non-judgmental, non-confrontational in your approach. And again, this is a one-on-one session with a young person, okay? And that's how we do that. It's all based on these three, pillars here: stages of change, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Again, we're not doing therapy, but it's based on that. And as you've heard probably all of us talk about here, motivational interviewing, right? That's the style of how we do this. And it's not going to be surprising. It's the style of how all three of these really work with young people, because it just makes so much sense. And, so we're doing a lot of open-ended question asking. We're doing a lot of affirming of people. And even, and it's really important that we're not doing this at them. What we need, brief intervention is all about putting that, put it away. And instead, we're going to say, hey, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you for filling out that worksheet. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you may be the only person that uses those two words with them that whole week. And then you're going to reflective listen. You're going to summarize to them what they've said. And that's kind of what we do. In the first session, there were actually 6 worksheets, hence the name of the training, brief. We're not spending hours on this, but, there's these 6 worksheets that we are going through with people, right? And we're having like 5 to 7 minute conversations based on the answers that they've come up with. So, that's how this works, and that's what we do. The second session, really, there are some worksheets, but it's really about the conversation and trying to develop a plan to assist the young person in reducing or eliminating substances in their life. We're going to teach them a 5-step plan, what to do when you get in situations where substances is going to be offered to you. And we come up with an emergency plan with them. Okay, so it's really these 2 main conversations. Again, they are very, very worksheet based. And there's some information where you can contact me, but really more importantly is, again, for the last 5 years or so, LA County Office of Education has sponsored these trainings. And you could contact Mark and LACOE for more information on that. And if you want a district training where you have 20 to 40 people, you can contact EMT, whose property this is. I also thought what I'd want to do is share with you for 1 second here is, let me just share a sample here of the worksheets here of what we're talking about here and the conversations that we're having. So I'm going to pull that up for you for a second here. So this is just an example of the worksheets that we have here. And so in terms of that leads the conversations, this is the first worksheet. What are some of the reasons you like to use alcohol or drugs? What are some things you don't like? What are the good things about continuing to use as much and as often as you've been are? And you're going to get so many great answers to use to have discussions with that one. What are some things that might not be so good or might get worse? What do your friends think? What do your parents think? And do they impact you? Anyway, there's a total of 9 worksheets that we're doing with the young people. And if we have the parent meeting, there's actually, some worksheets with them. The other thing is we also have all of the worksheets and handouts in Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, and English. And so, if you have people who are working with that group, but again, it's a one-on-one with the student who's been caught. One of the things that makes us a little different and unique is that we don't spend so much time talking about the drugs themselves. It's not a conversation about the substances, but it's about why you use and why you like to use. And do you have any interest in looking at that and making any changes regarding that? So we don't focus on a whole lot of information. I've never found that you give a young person a pamphlet and they say, God, I didn't know this. I'll never do drugs again. information is important, but when you're trying to get someone to make a change, it's the motivation that you're looking for, and letting them know, you're going to decide what you're going to do and what changes you're going to make. And, we're going to spend some time chatting to see if you're interested in making any of those changes and what it might be. But what we find is when you start asking those questions of young people and they write it down, you could have great conversations and hopefully get to the, maybe it's not all good, and have a conversation that will really help with a young person.
Hey, so one thing I really like about BI is that it's not just specific to vaping. They really do address alcohol, all types of substance use, drugs. And so this can really fit into a campus policy when it comes to any type of substance use, not just vaping. But I do recognize that it is kind of a heavy lift because you do have to have a staff member or maybe even multiple staff members dedicated to this work to be trained and to be the one to carry it out throughout the school year, throughout the campus, maybe even throughout the district. A lot of times we see this happening with specifically substance use dedicated counselors or an identified counselor or even TOSA that may be, this is one of their sole roles at that school. And so it does require the capacity to be able to do that. But I think it's a really great program for students to be able to, talk one-on-one with somebody. Next, we're going to look at Healthy Futures. We have Scott Gerber, who is the Director of Outreach and Strategic Partnership, and he's going to talk about their two different programs. There is one, My Healthy Futures, which is an asynchronous program that students can be assigned and do on their own. And then Our Healthy Futures, which is staff-led. This does not have to be one-on-one with a student. It could be small groups. It could be individual as well, but he's going to talk about both of those programs. The self-led program is about 90 minutes long. The staff-led is flexible. It could be anywhere from 1, 2 to 4 hours long. And this program does specifically target nicotine and cannabis vaping. There are 2 different versions. There is a new data collection dashboard that he will briefly touch on in terms of how you can use this and measure the impact of this program on your student vaping issues. And they are always offering free trainings. We are offering free trainings. We have a couple coming up in November, which we will share with you at the end. But if you can't make it to any one of ours, Stanford does have a calendar or a list of free trainings that they are constantly offering throughout the school year. So we'll hear a little bit more about the 2 different versions of Healthy Futures from Scott Gerber.
I'll share my screen, talk a little bit about Healthy Futures. I'm also excited just because YVAPE and Brief Intervention are programs that I've used quite a bit. And so I love seeing people having as many different interventions and supports in their tool belt as possible, just because all of the data that we have shows that exclusionary discipline, meaning suspending and expelling students, does not generally have the impact and effect of improved attitudes, beliefs, behaviors. It tends to be really, as far as health disparities and health inequities, it increases those, not decreases those. So the more intervention supports we can have, the better for young people. So I'm going to get off my soapbox for a second. I really appreciate Linnell's intro to all of it. So I'm going to talk. I'm with Stanford's REACH Lab, and the REACH Lab is actually part of Stanford's University School of Medicine, and we're in the adolescent and pediatrics department within the School of Medicine. And I'm not going to see my face is big on your screen again, and I don't love that. So I'm going to skip my slide. But I was a school site elementary and alternative school educator. I was a district office as a student services coordinator for 21 years. And then I shared sort of Mark's role at a county office of education for 7 years in Alameda County. So I have a lot of work in schools and districts and counties working around tobacco prevention, education, cannabis education and awareness, and intervention supports. I'm sharing this slide because it goes a lot with what Linnell had shared as far as kind of the products and trends that you're seeing. And one of the things that I love the fact that you shared kind of the name recognition of Elf Bar and trying to change their name to kind of get people so they get to skirt the issue and get around it. But the one thing I will share on this slide is that there's a lot of times that people don't understand the amount of nicotine that's in these devices. And so the fact that when Juul first came out and they were talking about their one Juul pod had about the equivalent of 37 cigarettes worth of tobacco or nicotine in it. These Elf bars that cost about 16 to 17 bucks have the equivalent of about 590 cigarettes worth of nicotine. It's just night and day difference when you're comparing. It's similar to comparing the THC content from cannabis in 1975, where you've got 3 to 5%, or 1980 or 1990, even 3 to 5% THC, versus now when you're talking 30, 50, 80% THC content. So just looking at this, and this is information I'm happy to share as well. Healthy Futures fits in with our general, the Reach Lab has prevention and tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 supports. I'm not really going to talk about our tier 1, You and Me Together, Vape Free, and Smart Talk materials, because we're really talking about interventions. But I will share that we do have kind of those tier 1 all the way through, and I appreciate Linnell and Mark sharing that out with all of y'all. Again, tier 1, kind of health, safety first is kind of a tier 1.5 for alternative schools and really comprehensive. But Healthy Futures is really the one we're talking about today. And within all of our content, there are pre and post surveys embedded in that. I do know that student information systems in districts and counties can make it really challenging to find your data, to know how many students you provided prevention and intervention resources for. So we have embedded pre and post surveys in our interventions, which I'll talk about. So Healthy Futures, what is it? So Healthy Futures is really, it's based on motivational interviewing strategies, which I know is a big part of brief intervention and one of the kind of the foundational pieces that got us to Healthy Futures. Motivational interviewing, stages of change, cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's really intended for students who've been found in possession of tobacco or cannabis products. It could be an e-cigarette, a vape pen, it could be a blunt or some other tobacco or cannabis product, and it can also be used for students who are trying to quit. So within it, again, kind of looking at that cognitive behavioral therapy, motivation, motivational interviewing and stages of change, really trying to help the young person move from the behavior that you're not wanting to see on campus and the unhealthy behavior to what are some healthier alternatives. So there's actually, within Healthy Futures, it's really a suite of interventions. There are actually 4 different components to it. There are 2 components related to nicotine and vaping, and there are 2 components related to cannabis. The first one for nicotine, called My Healthy Futures Nicotine, and then there's also a My Healthy Futures Cannabis, and that's a self-paced, self-guided, and I'll walk you through and show you a sneak peek of something that Linnell actually and the team from LACO really encouraged us to move forward with. So we currently have a Canvas slide deck that is what facilitates the self-paced My Healthy Futures, but we're looking at a modification to that, which I think Linnell will appreciate because she really gave us some great feedback as we were building this out. So we have My Healthy Futures Nicotine, My Healthy Futures Cannabis, and we have Our Healthy Futures Nicotine and Our Healthy Futures Cannabis. And the Our Healthy Futures is that adult guided, adult led, either one-on-one or small group intervention. So I'll show you a quick live walkthrough of our Healthy Futures, the My Healthy Futures version. So I'm going to pop that up and bring that over onto my shared screen. So hopefully you're seeing, I'm going to look at Linnell's eyes to see if she's seeing the new screen that I just slid over. All right, excellent. All right, so it's gamified in some ways. The students can't move forward or backwards on the slides without completing the task on that slide. So as they get started in it, they'll come in, they'll take the pre-survey, it opens in its own window. One of the pre and post-survey components makes it so that when the student is assigned this intervention by a teacher or administrator or counselor at their school site, that teacher or administrator or counselor has a code that links the student to that administrator or teacher or counselor. So the students take their pre-survey, they come back, they continue in the course. As they work through the course, it really has a workbook that they work through that they can take notes on. They can do it electronically. They can also do it on paper copy. And it really helps them to think about what are some of my triggers? What are some of the things that go well when I'm using my substance? What are some of the challenges I'm facing when I'm smoking or vaping or using cannabis? So it really has them think through some of those pieces. So as they go through the course, they can't move forward without first clicking on each of the icons. So there's no ability to move forward in the course until they've really looked and unlocked each of the pieces of it. So that's a quick, I'm not going to go all the way through the course, but as they go through the videos, as they go through each of the components, they need to click on, and there's also, and I'm not playing the sound for it, but there's a little game sound that's playing in the background, which gets very annoying if I'm training on it. But if the students are doing it, it just kind of gets them moving as they're doing it. It also has voiceover. So for students who might not access some of the content by reading it, being able to have it read to them can be really helpful for some of the students as well. So giving them that option of having the sound on so they can be able to hear the text being spoken to them. All right, so I'm going to come back to the course. And so that's the My Healthy Futures. That's a self-paced version. You can assign it to the course student, give them the URL for the course, give them your teacher code, and then they can take that course. Usually takes around 60 to 90 minutes for the students to complete the course. And after they do it, they receive a certificate of completion so that they know that they've completed it. And then you, as whoever assigned it to them, also gets a notification that little Scotty has completed the My Healthy Futures intervention. So they get a certificate of completion and you get notified that they've completed the course. Again, My Healthy Futures is self-paced, self-guided for the student. It's online. And these are the steps that I just talked through about the fact that you provide them with the URL, you provide them with your teacher or administrator code, they take the course, and then they receive a certificate of completion when they get to the end. And again, I'm not going to talk too much about the data dashboard right now. That is something I can share with you either in the breakout at the end or at some point, but you get your own teacher code that makes it so the pre and post survey data you're able to see and collect both at the site level, but also in your district level and your county level to be able to support the work that you're doing and to report out on kind of change in attitude, change in belief, change in behavior for the students. The handbook that I talked about that the students work through, I'm going to tell you right now, it's a two-sided PDF that you can print out. I will share that the first time I printed it out and tried to put it together, it was like making a cootie catcher or origami or what. I could not figure out how to cut it. I ended up cutting it into 4 squares and then stapling it together. You will benefit from the fact there's actually a video on our site that takes about 30 seconds to watch, and it explains how to cut this up. It's only one cut, but I could not figure it out. And I ended up not building a cootie catcher. If you don't know what that is, again, I can explain that later, but it's something I have not done in 40 plus years, and I couldn't figure out how to cut and fold this. And again, this is sort of on our data dashboard, a place where you'd be able to see which students actually completed the intervention, and the students get a certificate of completion. So that was kind of an overview of assigning the course to the students. They go on, they log on, they take the course, and then, and Linnell sort of talked about this, but whether it's My Healthy Futures or Our Healthy Futures, whether it's brief intervention, whether it's YVAPE, any of those, I strongly encourage there to be someone at the school site who has a conversation with the student after they complete the intervention to be able to say, we want you here. We value you, you're important to us. The behavior, we can't have that on campus, but we want you here, because those students need to feel wanted and welcomed, not you were bad, you made a mistake, we don't want you here, kind of exclusionary again. So with any intervention that we're talking about, having some kind of debrief with the student afterwards is really important. So again, Our Healthy Futures is the adult-guided, adult-led intervention. And there's a 2-hour version and a 4-hour version of it. And really the biggest difference between the 2-hour and the 4-hour is how much time you give the students to process the information. Again, as you're working through stages of change and cognitive behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing, giving them time to write and reflect and leave and come back after the first session with you and talk about, okay, you talked about the fact that it was stressful in the morning going to your first period class or whatever was happening in the morning. You wrote down a couple of strategies to how to deal with that and how you were going to do something different than grabbing your vape pen or grabbing your cannabis or whatever it is. How are those strategies working for you? All right, what are we going to do next? So again, using the longer version, like the 4-hour version, really gives you time to process with those students and gives them time to practice it. And again, the 2-hour version and 4-hour version, I certainly don't encourage a Saturday school, only because when you talk about the idea of stages of change, and you could talk about it with grief and loss the same way, you can't tell somebody to process their grief and loss stages in 4 hours and say, okay, you're over it now. You've had 4 hours to process. They need time. And so working with students, I would certainly encourage you to use multiple sessions with the student, whether it's half-hour sessions, 8 half-hour sessions, or 4 one-hour sessions, whatever works for you and your site and for your students. There is a facilitator guide built into it that kind of walks you through, very much like a lesson plan, that says, this is what's on slide 1, and here's what you might say to the students and what their responses might be as they go through slide 1 or slide 2. So it talks you through that. And that facilitator's guide can be really helpful, especially the first time that you're doing it, really helping you to understand what was intended behind the slides. And again, that cootie catcher origami handbook, we would definitely encourage you to use that with the students, because it gives them a place to reflect their thoughts and feelings as you're going through the intervention. All right, so I'm going to stop my screen share. I will drop in into the chat if you want more information. There, you can definitely get more information in here and click on the QR code, and I will send you additional electronic copies of everything. I know that Linnell has them, as does the rest of the LACO team, but if you want more information, I'm happy to share that.
Yes, and so we will be sharing a lot of the resources and the links again in that follow-up email. But before we move on, one thing about Healthy Futures, if you are not new to it, one thing I do like about Stanford's toolkits, whether it's their prevention or their intervention programs, is that data dashboard. I have definitely used it with some schools and school districts that I've worked with out of our unit, to really track the impact or the just sort of like how students are responding to these programs. In one instance, we definitely did see a decrease in students who were being caught with vapes. Of course, there's lots of factors that can play into that, but the data dashboard helped us really track that. And one conclusion could be that these programs that were being used in the first and second semesters had a part in reducing those vape incidences. So that data dashboard is really great, whether it is just for your personal use to see how the impact of these programs, or if it's something you want to present at your next parent presentation or district presentation, if you are an admin of a school dish or a school site. Next, we're going to hear from Brianna Lenneman, who is the project coordinator with YVAPE. YVAPE is your referral program where you can refer students outside if you do not have the staff capacity to train and do these programs on campus. She's going to talk a little bit about this program, where it comes from, how it works. It's a little bit like brief intervention, but again, it is a referral system, so you do not have to train staff. You would refer the students to this program. Again, we do offer free trainings out of our office. We just had one a couple weeks ago, and I believe we are having another one in a month or two. But again, they also do trainings district and school wide if you are interested in contacting them directly. But next we'll hear about YVAPE's program from Dr. Lenneman.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. My name is Brianna Lenneman, and I'm the project manager of YVAPE, which stands for Youth Vaping Alternative Program Education. YVAPE is a program with Kick It California at UC San Diego Health. So just to give you a quick overview, YVAPE is a free alternative to suspension program focused on phone and video coaching support for students who are found with or under the influence of nicotine or marijuana at school. This program is available to California public schools who have students 12 years and older, and it's available in both English and Spanish. So I'll just briefly touch on data security, particularly since we're an external organization. Essentially, security of client information is of paramount importance to us. Both Kick It California and UC San Diego Health are HIPAA covered entities. So we have to comply with HIPAA privacy, security, and high-tech breach final rules. If you are interested in finding out more about our data security, you can follow this URL. And then we also have a consent component, which I'll talk a bit more about in a couple slides. But essentially, schools must obtain consent from the student before YVAPE can contact them. So our goals are to support a decrease in recidivism and suspensions among students found with nicotine or marijuana at school, educating students about nicotine and marijuana, providing help to students who want to work on nicotine cessation. This really is only if they're interested. As you said, we're a tier 2 program, so we're more about the intervention aspect. But we can help with nicotine cessation if students are interested. We also provide students, and we'd like to at least provide students in schools with a positive experience, and just to be there for schools who may not have an in-house program in place, or who would just like an additional option for their students. So before referring your students to YVAPE, we ask that schools register with us. And you can do this simply just by sending an email to our support email address, which is yvape-support@health.ucsd.edu, and just designating a school site contact. And so we have schools register because we provide them with a welcome packet, and this includes an explanation of student eligibility and the YVAPE steps. It includes our PDFs of our flyers and brochures, and it also includes a letter explaining the program to staff that the school site contact can distribute at school. So this is an overview of the YVAPE steps. So the first step is enrollment, then there's the initial call, there's a videos and discussion portion, and then a follow-up call. So I'll talk about each step next. So the school first needs to determine eligibility, which requires that the student is 12 years or older, was found with or under the influence of nicotine or marijuana at school, has a parent or guardian who provides permission for participation for students. This is only for those who are 12 to 17-year-olds. 18-year-old students can provide their own consent. And then also has an email address that allows external emails and access to a phone. The school then decides whether to use DocuSign or a PDF consent form. So if you choose DocuSign, the consent form will be sent to the student email address first, and then the parent or guardian of 12 to 17-year-old students upon the student signing. If you choose a PDF consent form, you'll need to collect a PDF of the signed consent form, which is downloadable from our website, yvape.org, and then email it to that support email address. Regardless of the consent method, the school site contact really is the one responsible for ensuring the consent forms are completed. So like with DocuSign, if we haven't received the consent form, the school site contact receives notification of that, I think after 48 hours and then after 96. Essentially because we can't contact the student until the consent forms are received. Then the school enrolls the student on our website, and then upon the consent form being submitted, an enrollment email will be sent to the student, parent, and school, and then the student also receives a text message. So here's our website. Hold on, let me switch this over, which is also available in Spanish. So to enroll a student, the first thing you do is right here, decide if you want DocuSign or PDF consent form. As I mentioned, if you choose the PDF version, then you just need to go down to the section on school personnel and click where downloadable forms, and it'll pull this up for you. And then, like I said, if you choose DocuSign, DocuSign will just email it to the student. And then you just fill out the school site contacts information, and then the next page will go through student information, which just includes the same information as well as what substances that they were found with and what language that they prefer. And then you provide parent information if it's a 12 to 17-year-old. I don't believe I'll have time today, but if you'd like to watch the YVAPE videos, they can be found at the bottom of the page. And then our About Us page also provides the KK California services for cessation. And then our resources page, which is new, this is for our cessation program that schools can enroll students in. We have our resources here, so our flyer, brochure, our sample calls. So I'll be playing a few minutes of one of our sample calls today, but we won't have time for the whole thing. So you can find the rest of the call right here. And then we also just have some external nicotine resources and marijuana resources as well that we recommend if students or schools or parents would like to learn more. Okay. So before I get into the call procedures and topics, I thought I'd just briefly touch on coach training. So our coaches receive 60 hours of in-house training. This comes in varied formats, which involves lecture, discussion, role playing. This is then followed by an intensive 1-month apprenticeship, which is supervised by one of our coaching supervisors. They also have weekly meetings to discuss cases. They also undergo additional training focused on working with youth. And then they have continuing education that they go through. So the second step of YVAPE is the initial call. So the student has the option to schedule a time for their initial call, and if they want a voice or video Zoom call. Calls can be completed between 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. During or after school on weekdays, and then 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays. If the student does not schedule a call or misses their appointment, a YVAPE coach will proactively call them, typically around 4, 6, 7, and 8 p.m. on weekdays and between 1 and 4 p.m. on Saturdays for up to 7 call attempts. And then a reminder email is sent to the student, parent, and school after 5 missed calls, so you know that we've been trying to reach them. And that email also includes our phone number in case they want to call into us. And again, the student always also receives a text message. The initial call tends to last around 15 to 20 minutes, but the student can talk to the coach for as long as they want. So the YVAPE coaching topics approach is focused on connecting with the students. So the coach kind of begins with attempting to engage in some rapport building. The student will talk about how they ended up in YVAPE, what they'd like to learn, their nicotine and marijuana use behavior, their kind of likes and dislikes about nicotine and marijuana use, health regarding nicotine and marijuana, and then their motivation and confidence about cessation. So a lot of this is using kind of motivational interviewing, trying to get the student to think about their behavior and think through what changes they may like to make. And then the marijuana and nicotine protocols are very similar. The only difference is some of the psychoeducational points on health, of course, are going to be unique to each. So here's a mock recording of the initial call. I think I could probably listen to 3 to 5 minutes.
Hello. Hi, hello. I'm calling from YVAPE and I'm looking for Jake.
Oh, yeah, this is Jake.
Hi, Jake. I'm one of the coaches. I'm calling from the program your school signed you up for to talk about your vaping. Is this an okay moment for you?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, great. So really what we'll be doing is I have a few questions just so I could get to know you a bit and see if there's any way I can be helpful. However, what we discuss, it will be kept confidential. So that means that anything we talk about, it stays private, and an exception would be if there were a clear danger to you or someone else. And also our calls, they are recorded and may be monitored for quality assurance. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's okay.
All right. And also there is a chance that your parent or your guardian will want to know what we talked about in our call. If that happens, I'll just go ahead and encourage them to ask you about it. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. And also I'm a health educator, which means that I can give you general information about tobacco and health, but this isn't a substitute for talking to a healthcare professional. I recommend you talk to your medical provider about your medical needs and treatment.
Okay.
And before we get started here, it is helpful for me to know what you were using in your vape when you got in trouble at school. Did your vape have nicotine and marijuana, or was it just the cannabis marijuana?
Just the nicotine.
Just the nicotine? Okay. And you're in 11th grade, is that right?
Yeah, I'm 11th grade.
How has that been going for you?
It's going okay. Just waiting for summer break to start. Have a lot of projects to finish.
Yeah, the final grind right before the celebration of the summer break.
Yeah.
That's good. That's exciting. And what was the situation that happened that led you to having to talk to us?
So I got caught using a vape in the bathroom,
Mhm.
and then I tried to hide it, but they searched me and found a device on me.
Mhm. And was that device yours or someone else?
It was mine.
Your device? Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that with me. I know it's not always easy to talk about. And what do you already know about this program?
They told me I would learn more things about vaping,
Mhm.
maybe some videos, but I don't really know too much.
Okay. Yeah, so let me go ahead and explain what will happen. So you're going to go ahead and have 2 calls with us. One today and one after you have a chance to watch a few videos on vaping. And then to complete the program, we're going to go ahead and send you a link after the final call just to answer a few online questions about your experience with YVAPE, and then that would be it. And just to let you know, we're not here, to lecture you or try to make you quit. It's just really to open up that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, and I am curious.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a little sample. The call recording is approximately 13 minutes. So if you'd like to listen to the rest when they start actually getting into some more of the coaching topics, you can find that on our resources page. It'll be the same call. So then after they complete that initial call with their coach, the third step is the videos and discussion. So we do encourage parents to participate in this activity. However, parental participation is entirely voluntary and students will not be penalized if their parent does not participate. Instead, sometimes like school counselor will engage in the videos and discussion with the student, or they may watch them with like a sibling. And if nothing else, our coaches will talk through, spend extra time with them on the follow-up call if they didn't have someone to engage with this part of the portion, part of the program with. So there's 7 video topics currently. There's marketing manipulation by the vaping industry, health effects of vaping nicotine, health effects of vaping marijuana, your brain and lungs, understanding motivation, dealing with stress, and personal responsibility. The videos are approximately 2 to 4 minutes a piece. And as I mentioned, they can be found at the bottom of yvape.org. We'll also be launching 2 new videos in just a few weeks on nicotine and mental health, and then asking for help to quit. There's also 8 questions for students and parents to discuss with each other. Like I said, if the parent doesn't participate, a school staff member may, or a YVAPE coach can discuss the questions with the student during the follow-up call. So some examples of the questions are things like, how do you think your life would change if you stopped using nicotine and or marijuana? What changes might you notice in the next few weeks? And what changes might you notice in the next few months? And then think about a time when you were happiest. What was going on then? What do you think you would have to do to feel like that again? And I should also mention that we only ask that the students watch a minimum of 3 videos. Of course, they can watch as many as they want. And then we ask them to go through 4 or 5 of the discussion questions, the ones that they find most relevant or interesting to them. So then for the 4th step is the follow-up call. The procedures are quite similar to the initial call. Essentially, during that initial call, the student will schedule their follow-up voice or video call. Again, if a student misses an appointment, then a YVAPE coach will proactively call them on successive days for up to 7 attempts. And then like the initial call, a reminder email is sent to the student, parent, and school after 5 missed calls. And then the student, of course, also receives the text message. And this call can last typically around 15 minutes. But again, the student can talk to the coach for as long as they'd like. The YVAPE coaching topics for the follow-up call are essentially to check in with the students, see how things have been going since we last spoke to them, to review the videos, see what the student thought about them, did they learn anything, did anything stand out to them, discuss whether there were any changes in their nicotine and marijuana use behavior, as well as addressing any questions the student may have. And then for the nicotine protocol, the coaches will also invite the student to utilize other Kick It California services, particularly if the student wants to work on cessation. If the student is interested, the coach can then complete the intake call for Kick It California cessation program right then during that call, or they can schedule that for a time where the student has more availability. Currently, we're only providing psychoeducation for marijuana rather than cessation services. So for the marijuana protocol, YVAPE refers out students to SAMHSA's national helpline if they want help like developing a marijuana quit plan. We are hoping that this is going to be able to change potentially next school year, though. And then completion of the follow-up call now completes the program. We previously used to also send out a post-program survey, but we have just recently removed that so that students aren't penalized for not completing that part of the program, which really helped us more than anyone else. And so we've moved some of those kind of like substance use questions into the follow-up call. Typically, the program takes students around 2 to 12 days, depending on the student's availability when they want to schedule the call and whether they pick up. Our minimum completion time right now is 2 days. We have that initial call, and then they can watch the videos and discussion, and then the next day they could do the follow-up call. We are, though, in the process of potentially developing a 1-day version as well that we might be launching next school year. An email goes out to the school, parent, and student confirming that the student has completed YVAPE. The student also receives a certificate of completion. And then if the student does not complete the program, 4 weeks after enrollment, an email goes out to the student, parent, and school. And then that email specifies the activities that the student hasn't completed. School students or parents can request that the student is reactivated at any time. And when this student's reactivated, we restart our 7 proactive contact attempts wherever the student left off. We also provide semester reports to schools in January and July, which provides data on referrals, completion rates, the student grade levels of the students that they referred, the substances at enrollment that they referred students for, and then self-reported by students their substance use at the end of the program as well. And so we automatically do this at the school level, but if districts or counties request, we'll also do aggregate data for districts and counties. And then lastly, I just like to go over a little evaluative data. This is just from the first semester of this year, so it hasn't been updated to March. But even though the primary goal of YVAPE is education and to get students to start thinking through their substance use, we have found that it can be helpful for cessation as well. So these tables show nicotine and marijuana use frequency reported by the student in the initial call versus nicotine and marijuana use frequency at the end of the program, like I said, just for the fall semester. So it only includes students who have completed the program between July 1st and December 31st of 2023. So the top figure includes students that reported they were caught with nicotine or nicotine and marijuana during the initial call, while the bottom figure only includes students that reported they were caught with marijuana. So the cells I'd like to focus on are those with red text. So in the top table, 76% of students who started YVAPE using nicotine or nicotine and marijuana some days had quit using nicotine by the end of the program. 40% who had been using nicotine or nicotine and marijuana every day had cut down to just using some days, and then another 40% had quit. And then in the bottom table, 52% of students who started YVAPE using marijuana some days had quit. And then while there were only 3 students who started YVAPE using marijuana every day, 33% had decreased to some days. And then 67% had quit marijuana by the end of the program. So this data basically just kind of suggests that many students are quitting nicotine and marijuana by the end of YVAPE. And that is all I have. So here's our websites. You can check out yvape.org and Kick It California or kickitca.org. I'd also like to just quickly mention that we also have an e-referral for schools to enroll students in Kick It California cessation program. This is for students who weren't caught, like they weren't in trouble, but they just come to you and want help with cessation. So it's kind of voluntary. And you can use that for this e-referral website right here. No need to register schools. There's just verbal consent, and it's a very simple form. You can also email me or Conley, who is our outreach lead, if you have any questions after today.
Right. So again, YVAPE is probably best used if you do not have the capacity or the staff to carry out some of these programs. They do a really, really great job. Some updates that they have completed or are working on is that students no longer need signatures by YVAPE. Now, if your school or your school district does require signatures, they do offer sort of like a template or a form that you could use, but YVAPE does not need the signatures from the students. However, they do need permission. The student has to agree and the parents have to agree. There is no DocuSign. They do now include the cannabis part as part of their program. And they originally had started out with maybe about 2 to 3 videos, but they have been adding a lot more videos. There's about 11 of them now. You can even go to their website and watch the videos. You don't have to be enrolled in the program. It's all accessible. It's not behind like a password protected or an account. Sometimes we have seen students or actually schools use the videos and assign them to students themselves. The program is 12 years and older. Of course, if a student is 18, like your seniors, you do not necessarily need a signature or permission from parents. They do have an option now where the person who is working with the student can schedule their first call without YVAPE having to schedule that. That was really something that some schools were asking for. For instance, if the SRO or the admin was with the student in the moment and the student agreed to do this program as an alternative to suspension, it gave the admin or the adult the ability to schedule it then and there so that the student didn't have to do the follow through. It was already scheduled. We actually had Dr. Lenneman present for a 60-minute overview where she really went into depth and went over more information than we could really cover today in our kind of 20-minute session. If you are interested in that, we have the YouTube link if you want to watch the 60-minute overview that she gave last week. So with that said, we're going to look at how some of these programs are being used in school districts, how they are fitting it into their discipline matrix and in their policies, and just kind of sharing some of the promising practices that we have encountered when working with school districts. The first school district we're going to hear from is Katie Burkhart from Alhambra Unified School District. She is the instructional specialist for student support services. She has been trained for BI. She uses a lot of different programs and different systems at her school district that has been built for a few years. And she's going to kind of go over how they use some of these programs and other promising practices that they use within that school district.
Thank you, Linnell. All right, I'm hoping that everybody can see my screen here. I am Katie Burkhart from Alhambra Unified School District. My title for the last couple of years has been instructional specialist, and I work in the Student Support Services Division here at the district, and I also fill the role of TUPE coordinator. Alhambra Unified School District is just outside LA. For those of you who don't know, we have about a 16 square mile radius. We serve sort of a tri-city area of 4 cities: Alhambra, Monterey Park, Rosemead, and San Gabriel. And one of our high schools also gets the majority of their students from the Garvey Elementary School District, so we have partnership with them as well. So a little more about AUSD, just for context, we have 13 elementary schools and 3 comprehensive high schools. We're kind of split evenly in our demographics between Latino students and Asian students, and then 3% of our students are identified as 2 or more races. We have lots of students in our district for whom English is not their first language, and about 65% are identified as low income, foster youth, etc. So a little bit more about me. As an IS for Student Support Services, my primary job is supporting the TUPE program here in the district, but I also take on some of the work in initiatives in our district for anti-bias education and promoting restorative practices in the classroom. What I've seen as a teacher, I was a high school English teacher for 25 years before I took this position. What I saw, especially in the past 5 or 6 years, was what this image reflects, which is a lot of students just kind of going through the motions. I'm fine, even when you check in with them, right? I'm fine. But underneath the surface, they needed a lot of help. So my prior work, prior to taking this position, fits really well into sort of what the principles of the TUPE program are and how we implement them in our school district. So we know that suspension does not solve problems for kids, right? my assistant superintendent here says we can't, punish pain. And a lot of the reason why students are involved in these kinds of behaviors is because they are masking some level of pain. So suspension does not solve those problems. In fact, it can exacerbate them. So what we need is the intervention, and that's what our district stands, because it causes results in fewer risk factors, less substance use, and helpful to our schools, especially less use on campus, right? So in the past, and I was a teacher before becoming this the TUPE coordinator, and this is where I was too. I was not in the loop, and I think Linnell talked about the importance of communication earlier. I would be worried about a student's behavior in class. I'd be, suspicious of some of the behaviors, and I would send them to the office, or I would make a referral, and then the student would come back, and I knew nothing about what happened, what kind of discussions took place, what kind of reach out or check-in to the student was done. I just lived in that question mark space. And I think it's really important for people to know, and I've made it one of my main priorities in this position, is to communicate what happens in those question marks, right? But we also know that unlike other behaviors, substance use at school harms the student involved mainly, and our approach should be on helping and not punishing them. Positive, our district is a restorative justice district. We do use restorative justice principles when it comes to all of the disciplinary actions that we take. So we use PBIS. We have a embedded social emotional learning curriculum that is done throughout our district, and then we use restorative justice practices for disciplinary issues. And we know that these restorative practices work, right, because they go to the quadrant there with the with, right? They are restorative, they're collaborative, and their aim is to make the student feel connected to what's happening in their school and with the adults at their school. So the AUSD TUPE program is part of the Student Support Services division, and this poster on the left here was made into posters last year for every school site, and also stickers that we hand out district-wide, and that QR code takes us to the Alhambra Unified School District Student Support Services website, of which TUPE is a part. And our shared understanding in TUPE, and this is what I try to share with all of the adults that work in our district, is that the best way to help people not use substances on school grounds is to help them stop using substances, right? And punitive measures are not going to do that. So in AUSD, students who violate tobacco policies, marijuana policies should be approached in a supportive way that focuses on encouraging them to quit using drugs, alcohol, or tobacco products. So this is a flow chart that shows the support services that we use in AUSD. Our district has made posters of these as well, and they are on every campus and every office and classroom. Wherever they're needed, they go. And our district uses this to sort of guide our response to incidences involving use or possession of substances. So this is shared digitally with all teachers and administrators, and then put up in offices and classrooms across the district. And what it shows is sort of this progressive discipline policy when it comes to substance use. And the policy is data-driven as well. We look at our California Healthy Kids and our Youth Truth surveys, which are done every year. Youth Truth, I think, is done in the fall, and the California Healthy Kids survey is done in February. And this justifies the support over punishment model, which is the phrase that I use when I'm talking to adults in our district, including teachers and parents. So the restorative justice approach is sort of embedded in everything that I share with administrators, who are usually, especially assistant principals, who are usually the first responders when it comes to these issues. So I share a Google folder with administrators at the beginning of every year that has documents in it that include hyperlinks for quick access to all of the forms, whether it's the TUPE contract or the referral form, the referral form for intervention. And it also includes this document, which has a little script here for how to respond to students that are initially brought in for suspicion of use. And it uses that sort of restorative justice approach and encourages connection over kind of a punitive response. These are the examples of our contracts. So we have an elementary TUPE contract and a secondary TUPE contract. There's also embedded in there a Google form referral, which is how we do referrals for intervention. It's on a Google form. The Google form comes directly to me as the TUPE coordinator, and then I reach out to the schools to set up time to go and meet the students. When we talk to students, and this is administrators, I share this with administrators, I share this with teachers, and I share this with parents as well, using sort of person-first language, so avoiding using labels or adjectives to describe students, asset-based approach, focusing on strengths instead of deficits, and then obviously using brief interventions and healthy futures, which you have already heard about today, as a student-centered approach. It treats every student as an individual and works at engaging with them meaningfully. So we do use brief intervention in our district. I am one of the main staff members that facilitates the brief intervention program in our district. So it's usually me. Last year, it was last August, we did train all of our mental health counselors and school-based counselors in brief intervention, so that if there is a situation where I can't get to the student as quickly, maybe I am have a heavy caseload already, I can reach out to the counselors or the mental health counselors at each site, and they are trained in brief interventions, and they can also do facilitate the workshop or the session. The brief interventions I do use with students as young as 6th grade. Usually I'm using it for 8th through 12th, and again, supportive and inclusive strategies. I think what Ira Sackhoff talked about is really important with how we approach students. I think that's a really important part of brief intervention. So it's intervention facilitated by school staff. Like I said, this was covered in the presentation presentations prior to mine. So motivational interviewing and stages of change. I do embed a little bit of education in there, especially if the student is interested. If the student has questions that I can answer, we talk about that. It is usually 3 to 4 one-on-one sessions. In my district, we do one pre-session, and then we do session 1, session 2, and a follow-up. And like I said, we've trained people in our district beyond just myself. Prior to this year, I was the only person in the district that was trained on how to do brief interventions. And it's a lot. Going out to every single school that refers students was a lot. So it's been really helpful to build capacity in that area. And the Healthy Futures curriculum provides an opportunity to work with younger students. And I have done small groups in the elementary schools and individual sessions using Healthy Futures. This is a poster that I made last year to better understand sort of what our services are, and so that I could communicate that well with teachers and adults on campus and parents. So we do use through the Stanford, we use the You and Me Together Vape-Free Prevention in 6th grade science and in 9th grade PE. And then from there, that's our tier 1 support. And then from there, we go into tier 2 supports of Healthy Futures, brief interventions. We also have partnerships with outside resources, like we have a connection with the substance use counselors at Maryvale and at Pacific Clinics who can run sessions or one-on-one counseling sessions. And we also use YVAPE and Kick It California, and I share cessation resources with students if they request them at the end of our brief intervention session. This QR code, again, on all of the posters, takes people directly to the referral form. And the referral form in our district has been updated this year to allow a non-punitive pathway to intervention. So before this year, it was only through administrators at each site that a student could access brief intervention through the TUPE office. Now the the referral form is for anybody who has a concern about somebody. So counselors can refer even though the student has not yet gotten in trouble. They can proactively refer, parents can refer, students can refer. So we've opened the pathways to intervention, which I thought was really important as well. I do presentations at each site, at each school site for parents. And I took this directly from the Brief Interventions curriculum. And when I saw this, I thought as a teacher, I would have loved to have had this, something that I can put in my classroom and remember about how to frame conversations with kids that centered compassion. And so these 6 steps of talking to kids about alcohol and drugs, I actually think it's 6 steps to talking about kids about any unwanted behavior. And I think this is the way to do it. And I share this in my presentations and my workshops with parents as well as teachers. Starting last year, we do a PACES, the Student Support Services Division, of which I am a part, does a parent and caregiver empowerment summit. This year it is on May 3rd. And last year we had a big TUPE presence there. We had TUPE table. We had TUPE funded presenters. And this year I'll be presenting a couple of sessions that are TUPE focused as well. So this is directly for our parent and caregivers in our district and services for them. And just kind of closing out, I really like this idea of like children learn what they live and they learn how they're treated and they learn what they see and what they experience every day at school. So you can read this on your own, but I think especially this idea of shame and encouragement and tolerance, right? This is how they learn to feel confident, and this is how they learn to like themselves and to have faith in themselves and others, and to learn that the world is a nice place in which to live. So thank you again. I am Katie Burkhart, Alhambra Unified School District. I'm pretty sure Linnell will share all of my contact information if anybody has any questions or if you need any resources that I can share.
Great. So you can see how Katie at Alhambra Unified School District is really utilizing all of the programs that we talked about today. You can see how they woven in brief intervention, healthy futures, their prevention curriculum from Healthy Futures or from Stanford's Reach Lab is really being utilized as well. And so you can see how they're really using all of those programs to fit into their TUPE policies. It is important to note that Alhambra Unified School District does get TUPE funds. They are part of the TUPE Tier 2 funding, and that is where Katie's position comes from. However, that is not to say that you need that grant or you need that in order to carry out these programs in the same or similar way that Alhambra is doing it. So our next school district we're going to be looking at is Torrance Unified School District. They're going to talk a little bit about what they do. Again, they are also a TUPE Tier 2 grant, so they do receive some funds in order to carry out these programs. But once again, it is not necessary to have this grant or to get this funding in order to use these programs, these promising practices within your school district.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having us, LACO. We're happy that you were able to invite us, and we're happy to be here to discuss a little bit about Torrance Unified and our TUPE grant and how we've rolled out our specific district intervention plan with TUPE grant. So I'm Nancy Gutierrez. I'm a coordinator for family community engagement and the homeless foster liaison for Torrance Unified. And we have Monica here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Pavlovich. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist and the TUSD TUPE coordinator.
All right. So we'd like to introduce you to our team and also to what Torrance Unified looks like. So our team specifically for the Tier 2 TUPE District Consortium is of course, our director, John Pearson of Student Services. And also I'm the coordinator who's in Student Services. I'm the coordinator of Parent Community Engagement, as I mentioned. And thankfully, due to the grant, we've been able to bring on board Monica to be our TUPE mental health coordinator. And we're very lucky to have her join us from South Bay Children's Health Center to be able to help us roll out our services for the TUPE grant. So we have our website here located in our lower part of the slide so that you can get information if you'd like to see what information we provide for our parents and our community regarding the TUPE grant. We like to have that available in case parents or anybody wants to look at it, for staff to refer to as well if they have any questions, and then they know where to contact us and who we are. Just so that you have an idea of what Torrance looks like, we have 31 schools in our district, so it's a somewhat large school district. So we're spread out in the South Bay region. We're surrounded by the beach cities, and also on the north we have LAUSD schools that are in like Carson, Harper area. So we're going to go ahead and get started and give you an idea of kind of what our TUPE grant looks like and how our intervention has rolled out in the last few years. So that you have an idea of how you might be able to do so in the district that you're in, if it compares to ours, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So we're going to be discussing very briefly how this fits into our disciplinary process and how we're using it in lieu of suspension, one of the components of the TUPE grant. Monica will be going into describing exactly what brief intervention is, what it looks like in our district, and the pieces that are involved in rolling it out in our district. She'll also be discussing some of the success we've had throughout the last few years rolling it out in our district, and then I'll be going over some of the challenges we've had and what our next steps may be. So in terms of discipline, so we found that TUPE and the specific intervention pieces fit really well with our disciplinary program. So our district is very focused on making sure that our students are prepared to contribute and be lifelong learners. And so we're very interested in making sure that we have a tiered response to any misbehavior. And so this really aligns, this specific brief intervention program aligns really well with our progressive discipline approach instead of going to immediately suspend students. So our deans are very involved in that, our assistant principals and principals. So when something happens, they're observing, reporting, of course, for accountability purposes, and then they're doing an initial assessment of the behaviors. So a student may be caught with paraphernalia, they may be caught with specific substance on campus or under the influence. And of course, for accountability purposes, they do have to track those things, and it helps with data collection. But we also want to make sure that we're not just doing everything punitively. Right? We want to make sure that we're aligning with the state standards and also guidance on how we want to be a little bit more progressive discipline and focus on awareness and the educational component. So we're trying to foster a more positive school climate, hopefully reducing some recidivism for those students, and it perfectly aligns with our health initiatives in the district that we're trying to promote more wellness and overall for our students. So it has helped us to increase awareness and increase educational awareness for our students and our parents as well. So we're going to go ahead and move forward and talk about how we have established communication regarding TUPE in our district, and also how it has helped us roll out the brief intervention program in our district. So we have, of course, our district coordinator. So we were able to bring on Monica to coordinate the services across the district with our secondary schools in our district. We also have school site leads because they're the ones that we train annually on what services are available for TUPE. We give them guidance and support so that they're not doing a lot of the TUPE legwork, but they're the lead at their school site. And then they communicate with their deans, with their counselors, and also Monica helps coordinate the therapists and the social workers who may be going out to implement the services along with our interns. So we've slowly established different people across the district who communicate with our district coordinator, which is Monica, who coordinates all of it with the school site leads, and then the people who actually go out and either are referring students to us or implementing the service. So that has helped quite a bit to have that communication across the district. So then I'll have Monica go ahead and explain to you how brief intervention has been rolling out in our district.
Hello, everyone. I'll start with the definition of brief intervention. It is an evidence-based, short-term educational and counseling intervention for adolescents who have a short history of substance use, either have tried it for the first time or are just starting to experiment. They are not yet addicted and or dependent on any of the substances, and they are not necessarily ambivalent about changing their use. At Torrance Unified, in conjunction with LACO, we are able to offer a training for our staff at the beginning of every school year. We include some of our counselors, we include some of the therapists assigned to the middle schools and high schools, and also our interns that we get every year. It has been a great addition to the brief intervention program and allowed us to roll out the services to all our middle schools and our high schools. We have 8 middle schools and 4 high schools and a continuation school. Next, I will be talking about the implementation process. We have created here at Torrance a Google form that we have shared with our school site leads, our deans, our counselors, our therapists at each school site. So they go ahead, fill out the form, I receive it, I review it, and then I assign it to either myself, one of the interns, or a counselor or therapist at the school site if the interns and myself, our caseloads are full in terms of our BI calendars. I then go ahead and send an email to whoever the referring party is at each of the school site. Again, it could be a teacher, a dean, assistant principal, principal. Let them know that the student has been assigned a BI counselor, and include the BI counselor in the email. And from that point, we move on to the school site delivery. The school contact and the BI counselor communicate either via email or phone, discuss the referral, the incident. The school site lead goes ahead and provides a confidential space, whether it's a classroom or an office, for the school, in order for the BI counselor to provide 3 to 4 sessions of BI. And once BI is completed, they send over a summary via email to the referring party. Again, because the process is confidential, only stating the dates that they met with the student, whether or not the student was open and willing to participate in the program, and if there is a need for further referral to a community partner, whether it be in the substance use arena and or mental health arena, then that is also explained and noted in the email. After the email is sent, then the BI counselor speaks to the referring party, making sure that the referring party takes the lead in contacting parent and making the linkage to either an in-house therapist if mental health is going to be referred to the student, and or a community agency in the substance use arena. At that point, then the BI referral is closed. Some of the successes in rolling out the BI program at Torrance Unified is that we are very proud of our service delivery. We are usually able to assign the student within a week of the referral. We found that this is great because then we can address the issue pretty much as immediately as it occurred on school site. Over the years of the TUPE program, we have seen the referrals increase, and we are getting more referring parties. At first, we started with the deans and the APs, and then it segued into school counselors and the therapists, and a lot more people are referring the students to get the support that they needed and may have not gotten in the past. We are currently in the process of training more of our staff. At the beginning, it was myself, a few of the social workers from the district and the interns, and now we have extended it to our counselors and our therapists that are at each individual school site. Another success from rolling out the program is the flexibility to provide ongoing services. Yes, the main focus is to help the student understand and make better choices in regards to substance use, but we also are able to address any other needs and see maybe there's a mental health issue that the student may need support. There's family stuff going on, housing issues, and we can address and link the student and the family to services that will make their everyday struggles less. Now I will turn it over to Nancy and she will continue with some of the difficulties that we have seen.
So one of the things I did want to highlight, has been helpful to have Monica on board because she is a licensed mental health practitioner. That flexibility for ongoing services has been great because in some occasions, we've made exceptions to extend the services when they need mental health counseling from a therapist until we can connect them to mental health services either on campus or off campus. So that's been a great success by having her as part of our team and our coordinator. We've been able to address not only the substance abuse, but their need for mental health support. So going on to challenges, of course, whenever we roll out anything, there are going to be inevitable challenges that we face because we can't account for everything that might be happening. So one of the things that we did experience was that at the beginning, we realized that a lot of the school site leads that are TUPE coordinators at their school sites were not the deans. And so they're not the ones that are actually implementing the disciplinary process at their school site. They're not the ones catching students and actually seeing those things occur. So although there was communication between those school site leads and the deans, it wasn't perfect and it didn't always happen. And we did see that some deans would refer and some deans wouldn't. So we've worked on that in the last couple of years to increase that communication piece and make sure that our deans know about the program, know how to refer and have a connection to Monica so that it's more consistent across the district. We've also seen the second and third bullet here kind of refer to something that we've seen that we've kind of had to work case by case because there are some students where we're seeing significant drug use that's really beyond the scope of what brief intervention could be. Monica described how it's more for students who are just starting out, who are not quite really addicted yet, who are not significantly using. And so those students, when we do see them that are having significant issues, we're having to address them case by case and troubleshoot, which again, having Monica on board, being a licensed therapist was really helpful in that regard so that we can kind of address what would be the best route for resource referral for those students, which is very similar to the next one, which is students who are being caught for third or fourth offenses. For our second offenses, we are referring to YVAPE. So our school sites can refer because it does have not only the student component, but it has a parent component, which has been helpful for once a student has referred for a second time, YVAPE can be used for that process. So it's been really helpful for that second, but if there are students who are using third and fourth offenses, that's where we're not being able to use that service. So we have to troubleshoot and figure out, again, maybe what might be helpful for those students at that level, but we are trying to come up with individual case-by-case situations there. So our next steps, as we're facing, changes in our program, we're trying to figure out how we might streamline things and make things even better. We're trying to streamline our referral and also our data collection process. So it's been, really helpful to have some data, but I think as we're starting to go through this, we're realizing that it might be helpful to really be able to address a few more data points so that we can analyze the success of our program, which schools are referring which students, looking more at the outcomes for our students, and kind of finding out where we might be able to do a little bit more work and look at all of the stuff that's happening across the district. Are we being as consistent as possible? Are there certain areas where we might be able to improve? Also, we're continuing to strengthen our relationships with our deans and our school counselors because we would like this to be consistent across the district. So that's where we're also concentrating our efforts. So we want to leave it there. We'd like to thank you for your time. If you'd like to reach out with any questions, we've left our email below where you can reach any of us that's part of the team. So Building Bridges at TUSD, we'll all get it. And also we wanted to share with you the website that we mentioned at the beginning. If you'd like to check it out, it does have a few drop-down menus to give you information about our TUPE program. And we are open to questions if you'd like to reach out to us, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
So we will be sharing all of this information, the websites, the different types of the contact information in our follow-up email. But we do have other promising practices that have presented for us in the past that we will also be including. If you want to see how LAUSD uses some of these programs, how they've built their matrix. I really love their matrix because they've built it in terms of tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3. And then as it goes across the grid, it says what the students expected to do, what the parents and families are expected to do, what the teachers are expected to do, and what the school or admins are expected to do at every single level. We also have Glendora Unified School District and how they have created an asynchronous substance intervention that actually covers TK through 12th grade. And so we get a lot of requests for that because we are seeing vaping and substance use rise in the elementary levels. And there's not a lot out there for elementary prevention and intervention. So that's a really great promising practice that you may want to look at or watch later on. But this brings us to the end, and probably one of my favorite parts is the resources that we make available to you all out of our offices. As a reminder, we offer our services in terms of technical assistance, school staff and school trainings, as well as caregiver, student, and community presentations. We have our educational materials available to you in the form of pamphlets, fact cards, posters, and then we also have upcoming trainings. We do have some upcoming trainings for YVAPE and Healthy Futures if you are interested in that. So you can visit our catalog of trainings that are coming up and be able to see some of these programs in more in depth. And I would recommend bookmarking this page because we are constantly adding new trainings for the new semesters and new school years. And so just to kind of keep tabs on it to see what new trainings are coming out of our office periodically. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and sticking with us for these 2 hours. If you have any questions or if you'd like to meet with our team to see how we can provide support for you, you can go ahead and contact me, or you can contact our TUPE email. I would really appreciate it if you could take some time to take our survey. This helps us be able to understand what information you are looking for in order to provide future trainings. But with that said, thank you so much for being with us today. I want to honor your time. Have a great day, and I will stick around if there are any questions. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us.